important discussion about the middle school building committee and the middle school building project. As everyone probably knows at this point, they went back to the drawing board, cut a lot of things out, really pared down the project, and then made a new guesstimate about what the cost might be. And it is for that reason, because it's more than the original vote that the town made, that they're asking the town to consider an increase in the overall potential cost of the building. There will be a special town meeting on the 19th of January to hear again the thoughts and to hear again the thoughts and to vote. And then that meeting, as we all know, because it's an override, needs to be confirmed at a general town meeting, and that will be on February 16th, right before the school holidays. So I'll repeat those dates again: a special town meeting on January 19th, and then a ballot vote on the 16th. At the special town meeting, there will also be other items besides the middle school building project. So it's important for all of us to be there if we can. So this morning, I want to welcome the experts who have been dealing with all this and have they're up to their elbows in all that's been going on. First is Peggy Briggs, the chair of the FinCom. Peggy has been and her committee have been following all of this and really are an important part of our whole town government process, because they oversee the essential costs and the ultimate consequences of those costs for the town. So it's a significant committee. I should also add, what took me a long time to understand is that they're only an advisory committee. They cannot mandate anything, but I've always looked to their advice as wise and prudent. So Peggy, welcome. And then Laurie Hunter, who we all know is the superintendent of schools, and Dawn Gorilla are going to do, who is an architect in her own right, and guess what? An architect of schools. So we are particularly grateful that she is on our committee, middle school building committee, and we could spotlight Dawn at the same time. Laurie and Dawn will be doing, we'll be doing a tag team presentation of the middle school building project. Wonderful Carlin Reed will be in the background watching the chat box. So if you have questions, put them in the chat box, or at the very end, you can raise your hand and we will call on you to answer whatever questions. You do that, as we all know by now, by going to the reactions box and you put raise your hand, as I have just done. And then we try to remember to lower our hand after we've been called on. And then I also want to thank Nancy Confrey, who's doing the technical work in the background to make this run. And I also want to thank Linda Ziffrin in Arizona, who got up very early to help with the technical. So questions in the chat box, and here we go. Well, good heavens. I just got welcome to Apple Books on my screen for some strange reason. So it's now gone. Okay, here we go. We're going to start with Peggy and the FinCom. So we can spotlight Laurie and Dawn.
Thank you, and I do apologize. My understanding is my audio has a little bit of a scratching sound in the background, so I'll talk loud and hopefully it overcomes that. I am going to be fairly quick because I'm sure you're more interested in seeing the slideshow, what the middle school looks like right now. Article 5 at the special town meeting will be asking the town to authorize $7.2 million in additional excluded debt for the high school, the middle school. In 2022, the special town meeting just about a year ago, last January, the town authorized approximately $103 million for the construction of the middle school. As was mentioned, the estimates came in higher than that. That happened over the summer. And the select board has put a warrant on the special town meeting for an additional $7.2 million. this has been caused quite a bit of turmoil for the both the finance committee and the select board, but also especially the middle school building committee to scramble and react to that estimate over the summer during design development. Obviously, I think everyone knows that it's no fault of the committees nor any of the other town boards that the estimates came in higher than the approved budget by about 5.3 million, due mainly to construction inflation, etc. From June through September, I know the middle school building committee worked. They agreed to value engineer the building, taking out about $2 million. And they will probably mention that the value engineering was limited to aspects of the project that would not diminish the educational plan. Currently, the project, as presented to the Finance Committee, is about 109 million, exceeding that budget. There were several discussions about what level will the design and estimating be when we get to town meeting. The warrant with the 7.2 million was called based on the 60% design level, and 90% design will be received about a week before town meeting. So we will have some more answers to the question of where it's going to come in ultimately. The select board put in looking at the $7.2 million warrant article, added about 2 million, a little less than 2 million, over the 5.6 million at the 60% estimate to allow for potential additional cost estimate. Just to mention, the town is prohibited by law from requesting bids. So far, we only have estimates. We're prohibited by law from requesting bids on a project unless that budget has been authorized. And that is why we need to have this town meeting and vote promptly and based on the information that we have to date. In addition to the inflationary impact on the estimated cost, interest rate pressures will increase the cost to taxpayers quite a bit more than the actual increase in the anticipated cost of the middle school. When we voted the 103 million at the 2022 special town meeting, we presented the tax impact to citizens based on a 2.75 to 3.75 interest rate on the bonds. And at that time, we projected the borrowing would be done at a 25-year term using a level debt approach. And at that time, based on the median home in town, which was valued at $971,200, the impact to taxpayers, that median taxpayer was going to be $902 per year for 25 years. I had someone accidentally think that was a monthly amount, and it's not, it's annual. So turning to the current situation, first of all, it's going to be a couple of changes in our slides for town meeting. Firstly, the town recently completed a revaluation. So the median home value in town is now $1,170,000. So that's going to look a little different from what we previously estimated. And the cost will increase because of the borrowing. That happens whether or not Article 5 is approved. The 103 would go out at a higher interest rate, assuming interest rates stay a little higher, whether or not we approve this. The town is currently looking to finance the debt over 30 years rather than 20 to 25, as was earlier projected, to tamp down that tax impact. This is, in case you haven't been following, this is going to be the single biggest debt the town has ever authorized. The elementary schools are smaller, and high school received both state funding and, of course, 25% share from Carlisle. So with no state funding and no other town participation, this is the biggest borrowing we will have ever undertaken. So getting to, not trying to steal too much thunder from the middle school presentation, I'll try and stick to my lane here. Assuming we will be presenting several alternatives, probably at town meeting, and it is not up to town meeting actually to determine the financing options. That is solely the purview of the town treasurer. But we will obviously be presenting some assumptions now. So assuming a 30-year, these are updated numbers, a 30-year level payment borrowing with a new interest rate of 5.25%, and that's up quite a bit. The previous authorization would go from 902 to 924 per year. And the 7.2 million additional debt, which is the sole subject of this town meeting, we're hoping not to re-legislate. Well, I speak for myself and I'm sure the school committee, we're hoping not to re-legislate the previous authorization, which even if this doesn't get voted in, the previous authorization still stands. But the additional 7.2 million with those same financing terms would cost the median home $73 per year.
Peggy, I just want to say that for people who may not be able to pick up all those details, there is going to be a FinCom mailing that will come to every home. And those details will be available at that time, and you can review them then. And we all are hearing the sliding behind. I just keep imagining that somebody is shoveling snow behind you, Peggy, so we're all fine. But
all right.
It's okay. But I wanted people to know we are aware of that, and and just for you to know, if you're not picking up all the detail, you'll have a chance to receive that in the mail. Okay, I'm sorry, Peggy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually reading from our draft finance committee report. So I guess I must have to go to the Microsoft store today and figure out what's wrong with my speaker. So to summarize, the finance committee has spent a good half a year with the school building committee. We've had lengthy discussions. We've had a hearing. Our members are all very cognizant of adding to the tax burden of citizens. But we did vote 11-3 with one abstention in favor of recommending affirmative action on this article, which basically means we favored it overwhelmingly. We believe that the benefits outweigh the detriments. We think that moving forward in a timely manner will, at the end of the day, be less costly for the town than delaying, redesigning, and taking more of a risk with the interest rate. We have a couple of tools, stabilization fund, stretching out the financing term. So we would, at town meeting, will remind everybody of tax support available to the town. But we did vote overwhelmingly in favor of affirmative action on this article. And I'll stop shoveling snow right now.
Thank you, Peggy. The computers and their systems. That's really helpful. And I think that if you have a chance, if you didn't hear the public hearing, you can also go back to see the public hearing, which is recorded, and hear the FinCom's discussion of their eventual positive vote. And now we're going to hear from Dawn Gorella. And go ahead.
Sorry, Diane. Just to follow up, it was not an easy decision. It was by no means a slam dunk. But at the end, I think we were all convinced that it was the right thing to do.
It was a very thorough and very thoughtful discussion. And Peggy is masterful. I mean, she had everybody on the committee comment and speak. It was a very good meeting. So we now have Dawn and Laurie. We all know both of them by now, but Dawn, as I've said, is an architect herself. And guess what? An architect of schools, if you missed the beginning of the program. So it's wonderful to have her as a co-chair of the building committee. And then we all know Laurie Hunter, who is our extraordinary superintendent of schools. So the two of them will now tag team and present the actual program that they're going to present to the town itself. Please remember, if you have any questions, to put them in the chat box. Carlin Reed is managing that chat box. And if you have questions at the end and don't want to put them in the chat box, you can raise your hand. And I'm going to do that one more time. There's usually a reaction button on the bottom of your screen, and you can raise your hand. And then we try to remember to lower our hands. We're going to get so good at this by the end. All right. Thank you, Dawn and Laurie.
Thank you, Diane, and to the league for having us today. And thank you to Peggy and the entire FinCom. As mentioned, the public hearing, that feels like a month ago, but maybe it was only a couple of weeks ago. Very, very thorough discussion. So please go back and watch the recording if you're interested and want to be brought up to speed. So Peggy went through a lot of numbers. I just want to take a step back and just remind everyone that the town about a year ago, is January 20th, 2022, almost to the date of the new town meeting, special town meeting, which will be the 19th. So don't get confused. Approved an amount of $102,816,000 to build a new middle school. And that's total project cost. So it's the construction cost plus all the soft costs, which are designer fees and OPM fees, et cetera. So total project costs. So what we hope to walk through today is how we got to Article 5, which Peggy mentioned. I have my little mailer. Everyone should have received this in their mailbox maybe a month ago. But what we're in front of the town on January 19th for is to see if the town will vote to appropriate a sum not to exceed, very important language, $7.2 million to be expended under the direction of the town manager in consultation with the Concord Middle School Building Committee for the additional costs to construct a new middle school. And then the rest of the language. And so that 7.2 is on top of the 102,816 that was previously approved. So the 102 has already been approved. That was almost a year ago. We are spending some of that money currently paying our designers and our OPM. We are going to walk through today how we got to where we are and why the costs are higher. And some of it may be self-explanatory if you're buying gas, groceries, et cetera. There's been a lot happening in the last year. So we're just going to walk through how that affects our project. But before I get there, I do want to remind everyone what the middle school project is all about. Take one step back and just remind you of what's important about the design and why we as a committee felt it important to not cut certain aspects of the project because they're critical to the design of the building. So Laurie, would you move forward a slide for me, please? And I just want to mention, I'm a co-chair. Pat Nelson, who can't be with us today, is my fellow co-chair. We support each other in ways that we never thought imaginable. So I'm an architect, a school architect, as Diane mentioned, but this is not my project. I'm not the designer here. I just happen to have that expertise. So, Pat's lived in town, has been on many building committees. So we as a pair, and in consultation with Dr. Hunter, are leading this committee. And I want to say collectively, we're like 18, 19 members. So it's with a wide range
13 voting members, Don.
13 voting, but then there are some that are part of the committee that are non-voting, but their experience and expertise is critical to our committee. So thank you, Lori. So just so you know who is working on this, and I want to say we're 3 or 3.5 years in at this point working on this project. So maybe it's 2.5.
I think you're, yeah, it's hard to keep track, Don.
It's been a while, and part of it's COVID. So yeah,
we're
exactly.
rounding through the 3rd year.
So just giving some background, but anyway, what we're here to talk about, the middle school design, what's important here. And Lori, I don't know if you want to speak briefly to the educational program. This is our #1 piece of, this is what the design is wrapped around, meaning you write this educational plan or program, and it's on our website. Everyone can go read it. Many pages of documentation of how the school plans to deliver education to the 6th through 8th graders in Concord for currently, future, and beyond. So this is how they hope to deliver education. And this becomes critical in building design for schools. So Lori, if you just want to highlight, this isn't why we're here. We just want to remind you why this design is critical and what's important about it.
Yeah, happy to, Don. So just at a high level, you can see here on this slide, we've outlined that we're building a team model. So the kids will be divided into 3 teams per grade, and each grade has its own floor. And you can see just briefly here on the diagram how those teams are laid out so that they're cohesive within the team and then consistently next to each other. Do you want to talk on want me to just keep going for a minute here on the?
Yeah, sure. Because it's all related to the teams and educational plan. Sure. Thank you.
Definitely goals within that are to make the environment as optimal for learning as possible, including light, connected to nature, which is part of the gift of the campus at Sanborn. The nature is right there and available, and it's going to be drawn into the building essentially. The media center, we're considering a hub and heart of the school so that it's a really fluid space, really active for the kids. And we've pulled art and world language. If you notice on the teams, these are the core classrooms: English, science, social studies, and math. Art and world language have their own little hubs on the common side of the building where the gymnasium, auditorium, cafeteria, and library are. So we're excited about the model. It fits a lot of our academic goals and social emotional goals for kids.
And I think it's worth mentioning the current buildings, because you're in 2, don't necessarily architecturally support that model. Is that right? You're doing your best.
Understated way to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have the team model, we have the structures there, we have the staffing there, we have the scheduling there. But because they're so spread out, especially at Sanborn, a little less at Peabody, just because it's 1 grade right now, the actual integrity of the team really doesn't hold during the school day, because the kids might have to traverse the whole length of Sanborn from the academic wing to a mod. And the intent is the teachers are next to each other and the classrooms are joined. So we're so excited for the vision of having that space, facility, positive impact allow us to really make the team model come to life. So
right. So high level, that's what the design is all about. And our architects have done a great job of simplifying this building in a way that supports that model without being extravagant. So the next piece is sustainability. We were asked by the town at special town meeting to have this building be net zero ready. And what that basically means is prepared for and capable of adding solar arrays to basically be net zero, which means that it will produce as much energy as it uses. And that's what in EUI, you see the chart there, 25 EUI was our design goal. That's an energy use intensity number. And if you don't know anything about that, it basically means it's a measure of how much energy a building uses. And I think the current Sanborn building may be like 100 plus EUI, something insanely high. So just for reference, we're trying to make it really sustainable and net zero ready. And we were asked by the town to do so. So this becomes critical because certain things, I'll use an example, triple pane windows allow us to, as opposed to you probably have double pane in your house, or maybe you even have single in an older home. They're very energy efficient, and it allows us to downsize our mechanical units, save some money, but also not have fluctuations in temperature. So that became critical because those are more expensive than, say, a double pane window. So there are some financial decisions that were made around this, but it was critical to our committee to uphold our commitment to sustainability. So this is, you could move on to the next slide, Lori. That's what this slide's highlighting. And the last piece are the public spaces. The Massachusetts State Building Authority, the MSBA, we are not in that program, but we are trying to follow their process, would not allow us to have a middle school allowed to have an auditorium, and they would restrict the gymnasium to 6,000 square feet, which does not allow for 2 MIAA cross courts. We heard loud and clear from the community back when we were designing the building and came up against some financial constraints, that it was really important to the community to both have an auditorium, but also a larger gym than the MSBA guideline, so that we could have parallel practices for boys and girls, and also community use for athletics within our community. So we heard it loud and clear. We made some design decisions and reduced some other spaces because Lori and her team decided they could make those spaces work educationally and work, share some of those educationally. So that became inherent to the design as well. So those 3 pieces, the educational plan, the sustainability, and the public spaces, all were aspects of the design we tried to maintain and uphold as we made value management decisions, which means like cost cutting. So if you want to move forward, Lori, the project schedule, we've been really, we've been trying to not fall from this, because as you know, time is money. And so we've been trying to maintain this schedule, but it's been difficult with trying to save money because costs have increased, but then also trying not to push out the construction dates as well as the finish date. So as it stands, we are still prepared to put the drawings out to bid in, I want to say it's end of February, beginning of March, and start construction next spring if all goes well and we get the additional funding from the town, the approval. And that would allow us to open, I want to say it's February, let me find it, February 2025. Yep, so 2 years from this coming February. Next slide, please. So here's where we are. The town meeting, as we talked about, approved the 106, but we took it from schematic design, which is what that was, which is basically a design idea with cost put to it, and took it through to design development. That came around in June, I think, June of 2022. And what we found were that costs were increasing at a rate that, because of inflation, wars, supply chain, you name it, this basically puts us currently at about 108.3 million. And that's total project costs. You can see at the bottom, the 86 construction costs. I think our original estimate was about 80 point something, just under 81. So we are less than 10% over, but this is where our current numbers are. Next slide, Lori. So back to where we were, STM budget, the 102,816, that in October, we're at 108.4, give or take. I'm going to use loose numbers here. So as you can see, our costs increased. We did not change the scope. The design is the exact same that was presented to the town a year ago, with the exception of the value management decisions that we made, but those did not cut space or concept. They simply cut some materials and some design that didn't affect the students, was what our goal was. So next slide, please. So why are we here? As you might know, that there's inflation has been record high this year, and in particular this past summer. So what that did was cause our costs to go up. We basically, with value management, we're only able to maintain the inflation costs. So we cut a bunch of costs over the summer, and in the fall, our number was exactly the same, even though we made cuts. So our cost cutting measures literally were only enough to keep up with inflation at that point. And in particular, construction inflation is high. So next slide, Lori. In Greater Boston from 21 to 22, it was inflation was 8.7. And just for reference, it previously annually was about 2.5% to 3%. So it's been unprecedented. If anyone goes back, I think our estimators met with our committee back in July, and both of them have been estimating public schools in Massachusetts for 30 years and said that this year was literally the worst they've ever seen and is unprecedented. So you could go back and watch the video from that meeting, but it was interesting to hear straight from them who have been in this industry for a while. So here are some examples. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but other projects, we're not alone, basically, are what these slides are saying. These may get reduced when we go in front of special town meeting, just for simplicity. But if you focus on the percentages, so Swampscott recently, this is a hard bid versus we're still estimating because our construction documents aren't done. A hard bid, they came in at 4% over, which actually makes me feel better because a lot of them are coming at 6, 7, 8, 10 and beyond over. So that was just October. That was literally like 6 weeks ago that came in. So that was positive news in the sense that we're starting to see a small decline, which is good. Would you flip through the others for me? And also the delivery method, which some of these letters may not make sense to you, but DBB is design bid build, which is basically a hard Chapter 149 bidding process. And you often get more competitive costs that way. That's what our project will be. And we're finding that those numbers are actually a little more, they're less over their budget than the CMAR, which is construction manager at risk numbers. So, Lori, if you would
Want to
just
scroll through these?
Yeah.
You can
I
see the
think-
numbers there's a range. We're grateful to not be in these double digit numbers, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I'm like, you can see the 15.6 at Groton, that's a CMAR, that's construction manager at risk, which is not how we're delivering our project. On the right, Westwood 5.7 DBB design bid build, that's how we're delivering. So we are finding that design bid build delivery methods are smaller percentages over. But the good news that comes, here's our number, we're at 6.5 over our construction cost. Our estimates currently, and our estimate that will come out right after the beginning of the year, which are 90%, are today's dollars, which are really worst case scenario because today's dollars are more expensive than last year's dollars, right? So our estimates are assuming if we were to buy the project out today, so those numbers have some increase built into them because they're today's dollars. They also have escalation, which takes us out to when it will be bid. And it also has some contingency, which is basically for unknowns. So there is buffer and some relief in there built into that. It'll be 10, I think we're maximum not to exceed, including the 7.2, 110, 16 million. So
John, would you be willing, excuse me, this is Diane for just a minute.
Hi, Diane.
Be willing to explain just once more the DBB, the difference between the DBB and the CMAR, just briefly, for people who may not be as familiar with that. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for asking. So design bid build is traditionally how public buildings have been delivered in Massachusetts. It's Chapter 149, which is a law in Massachusetts, MGL, Chapter 149, and it basically says you fully design a building, you draw the details, and you have it bid by a contractor who takes those drawings. If it's not drawn, then he doesn't own it. It's black and white, right? And it's not just drawings, it's specs too. But to simplify, that's how buildings have always been delivered in Massachusetts. Probably 10 years ago, gosh, I don't even know the law. They added a construction manager at risk delivery method, and it's Chapter 149 A. And that law is different in that you can engage the construction manager early. Like if we were doing CMAR, we'd already have him on board. He and his team, their team, get to be part of the design process and have an understanding of what your design intent is. And even if you didn't draw it, they may have buckets of money that they have put aside because you said in a meeting you wanted to have whatever it is, triple pane windows, but maybe your drawings don't quite show it yet. There's a buffer there. So their numbers are often different in how, and they do a GMP, which is a guaranteed maximum price. But in Massachusetts, they still have to do filed sub bids. So there's still contractors they're not able to pick. But if you take out the filed sub bidders, which is again, a Mass general law, they can go, as an example, they can go hire whomever from to do the site work because they have a relationship with them and they know they're going to do a good job. So they don't have to take the lowest qualified bidder. They can take, unless it's a filed sub bid, they can use companies that they have relationships with. So it's a different type of delivery method. You have to decide that early. Our committee decided, gosh, almost 2 years ago, I think, to have it delivered under design bid build. It's new construction. There's not a lot of complexity. The schedule is straightforward. It was recommended by our professionals to go that route. And that's consistent with what I see. If it was a ad reno with a lot of unknowns and a tight schedule, or you know, phased occupied renovation, that would be different. Those are typically a construction manager type of delivery. Does that answer your question, Diane? Does that make sense?
Well, thank you. And it, you know, it's just, it's a complicated process.
Oh my God, it's complicated. And if you don't live it, which I live it every day, it's really hard to, you know, to sometimes follow. So that's a good question, but that decision was made a while ago. And often we're finding it's interesting. The CMAR got more popular when the MSBA was giving additional incentive points, so money back to go that route. And then they realized everyone was going that route and they weren't really getting competitive numbers. And so they took that money away, that percentage point. And now we're finding a pattern of people going back to design bid build. And coincidentally, a lot of the CMs are bidding on design bid build projects. So there's like a shift in how projects are being delivered. It's interesting if anyone wants to look it up. So where were we? This was, if you
Really on the point, very consistently, the design bid build numbers are coming in lower than the CMAR with all this inflationary impact. So we're thankful that decision proves to hold and then be somehow beneficial as this unknown stuff started to happen.
Right. And that's consistent with what the two estimators, the two independent estimators that have been estimating this project are finding in hard bids as well.
Right.
So, you know, looking forward, it does appear inflation is flattening. There's not really any signs that it's going down, but flattening. So that's kind of what this chart is showing here towards the end of 2022 into 2023. No one has a crystal ball. We all wish we did. None of us want to be here asking for money. So, if you want to go forward, Lori, that's just what that slide's all about. So to get to some of the, to take a step back, because I don't think everyone understands or knows the meaning of value management. It's basically a process that you go through, and often it's a reduction in costs that you make decisions that reduce the scope in order to save money. So back in 2021, before we even went to the town for the original 102, we took some value management savings, and that brought us basically, so we took 2.1 and then again another 1.7. In 2022 we've taken 1.8 and 384. So collectively we've taken about $6 million out of this project between feasibility, schematic design, and design development, and into where we are, which is somewhere between 60% and 90% construction documents.
That's so impressive. I see Peggy has a question. Peggy, you want to
Oh, sure.
question?
It wasn't a question. I just hope, I think that you have maybe too many slides on other projects, but the point about design bid build versus construction manager risk came up in front of our committee several times, and I'm sure you've heard the same mainly, one or two commenters, but that is certainly a point to cover at town meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so next slide, Lori. I do want to get through these so we can get to other questions that folks
Yeah.
have. So this is just a slide that actually one of the Peggy's FinCom members asked us to put together, and I think it's been very helpful to kind of tell us where we've been since town meeting. So the first column with the photo, that's basically where we were last year, the 102,816, right? It's highlighted on the left. In June, we got our estimates and we were at 108.4. We went through a VM process. Again, it's worth highlighting, it's basically the same design, and any VM value management decisions that we made, we tried to keep it to decisions that didn't affect the student experience. We felt it was really important. So those three pieces, the educational plan, sustainability, and the community pieces, the gymnasium and auditorium. In September, we had gone through a value management process and we still came in over. We were at 106.4. That's our design. Yeah, so that's plus VM. So after our VM, that's where we were, 106. And then in October, we got our current estimate, which has us just over 108 million for total project cost. So that takes us to where we are today, which we asked the select board for a article not to exceed 115 million, because again, we weren't sure. This was back in the summer when we were like, when numbers are all over the place. Since then, we've received the October estimate. We're at 108.4, and they select board voted to put the warrant article together at 110, essentially.
What will equate to 110 total.
That's correct.
Cost.
Collective.
Right.
Yep. So that's the additional 7.2. So just so we're all clear, it takes us from 102.8 plus 7.2 in front of us at this article, takes us to approximately 110 million for total project cost. So the last column, what if no? So we've already approved the 102.8. If this article for the additional 7.2 does not pass, what that will mean, which I think we've sort of highlighted here, a lot of the value management that we took were tough decisions, but they did not impact the scope. If this article does not pass, this building would substantially change and would affect the educational plan in the sense that spaces would have to be deleted or downsized. The net zero readiness, the sustainability, like we likely wouldn't get to net zero ready because some of the sustainable aspects would need to be deleted in order to save money to get us down to the 102 that was previously approved. And lastly, the community spaces, whether the gym would need to get smaller and the auditorium get smaller or possibly even go away. We don't know because that building hasn't been designed with today's dollars yet. We just know that there would be a delay in schedule, which could cost multiple $1 million, as well as the major scope changes, which I just spoke about.
So Dawn, just to total that, you lose time, which is money, and inflation is going to keep playing into all of this. And so you could end up at what would equate to an $11 million problem instead of the $7 million problem. So
Right.
it's picking your bad options at this point. Unfortunately, that's where we are.
Right. Thank you, Lori. So this is where we are. I already kind of talked about this. We asked for the 115, we got the 110. January, I don't even think this has been updated. Special town.
No, I didn't get a chance
to
to put
be
the new date in
announced.
since it happened.
It's February 16th now, I think.
Yeah.
That got changed Monday night. So that's literally kind of breaking news. And we appreciate the select board doing that.
And Dawn, we announced in the beginning that the special town meeting is January 19th. And the town vote will be February 16th.
Yes, so that's what this says at the bottom, January 19th special town meeting, and then this says date to be announced, but it is, it has, since we put these together, been confirmed. Great, thank you, Diane. Oh, and this, I kind of spoke about these
Yeah, let's
without
skim
the
through.
slides, so apologies. So
I
here's
think we
the
referenced a
schedule.
lot of this too.
Yeah, I was just trying to keep it high level, so, and here's the scope reduction, yeah, so.
Thank you so much. Your collective knowledge is invaluable. Let's go to
Yeah, let's go to questions.
Yeah,
We have
this is
these, if
all
there's
kind of
questions they
background.
might support, but let's open it up.
Okay. Raise your hands or put something in the chat box, and let me start with Carlin. Carlin, what questions do you see and what do we have?
I have a couple of basic questions. One thing I want to ask about is, first, does the special town meeting vote on January 19th have to pass by a 2/3 majority? Is that the
Yes.
standard? Okay, and then the special town election, which is February 16th, that's a majority
Correct.
vote, right?
That's right, 51% or whatever, just over 50%. So it's 2/3 at special town meeting and then majority at the vote, at the ballot. Thank you for asking.
Good. All right, let me go back to the big question, which is, okay, if this does not pass, what's going to happen? And there was a question that you posted in the chat, and Lori, I think you alluded to it briefly, an $11 million escalation. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Dawn, you want to? I
Sure.
can start and Dawn, you'll chime in. We're going to have to go backwards essentially because the scope of the building won't allow that it won't allow the 103 to work. So we're going to have to redesign the school with the target of the 103. However, it's going to be very, very difficult to do that. You're going to lose a lot of the priorities that have been named throughout this whole building design process. And at some point, you're going to lose so much that you're also going to incur costs of the time delay. And so you're going to have these competing factors of increasing costs, competing against the time it takes to redesign the school, while the scope of the building is going to have to keep dropping. So if you want to maintain most of what we've prioritized, there's a big price tag attached to the delay. Dawn, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I just want to add that, sorry, I had a thought and then I got distracted by the lawnmower. That we can only design one building, right? So in that, we're paying an architect a fee. And back when it was over budget, we asked the architect to continue moving forward with the building that we desired, because we were hopeful that we could either, that escalation would change or that we could get the cost down to something that was closer to our budget. Because we felt so strongly that, and that's the reason we opened with what this building is and what's great about it, as a reminder, in that was the building our committee believes is the building that Concord needs for 50 years. So we have asked the architect to continue down that path at a risk of this not passing. If it doesn't pass, we have to stop and ask them to design a $102 million project. And without designing that, we can only speculate. But we do know that in order to get down to the 102 in today's dollars, it will substantially decrease the scope and will affect sustainability and the community spaces, as well as take more time, which of course we just spoke about takes, costs money. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how it came to be that we're over and that we don't have a building designed at 102 in today's dollars because we haven't paid an architect to do that yet.
We thought we did.
Yeah, we right.
We worked
thought
really
did.
hard to do that, and it
I know.
hasn't
Yes,
helped. So.
thank you. Yes, right.
There are a lot of good questions in the chat box. Peggy, your hand is raised. Do you have another question that you'd like to ask?
I just wanted to comment that I think the zero net ready sustainability aspects of the building was a separate town meeting vote. So those are off the table. You mentioned, maybe there's some sustainability things you could take out of the design, but the zero net ready is off the table for eliminating. I thought that was a
right.
town meeting vote.
Yeah, it was binding with the first 1.5 million to fund schematic design. I think that's going to be a really hard conversation if this fails, because you're going to lose so much educational scope to preserve the sustainability. We'd have to engage with the community on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be able to do it without a discussion. Not that anybody wants to trade the sustainability, of course, but just to be sure everyone understood the trade-offs that would have to come.
Pamela Dritt.
Thank you. In what way is the net zero ready off the table if it doesn't pass? Since what that does is actually save significant amounts of money. In other words, we would be cutting off our hand to save on weight.
I think Peggy just answered that. Essentially, it stays on the table because it's a binding town vote. It would have to get revisited for it to change. So at this point, if we had to go backwards right now, the sustainability aspects would not be touched.
Right. I think when you said off the table from being cut, I think is what was,
Yeah,
so maybe it was a double negative, which I think maybe caused confusion. Yeah.
Thank you, that was confusing, but it might be helpful to add up some generalized figures on how much this is going to save the town on the operating costs of the building and on our whole sustainability goals for the town as a whole, because people are more encouraged to vote for something that's good that they can see. They're more willing to pay for what they're going to get in a benefit. And a lot of the times in the presentations about the costs of things, the benefits, the cost benefits, the savings aren't mentioned. And also what aren't mentioned are, like you're doing now, which was very good, the costs of not doing it.
Thank you. Those are wonderful and helpful comments. Carlin, there's some fantastic questions in the chat box.
Yeah, there's one about financing this operation. Considering, and I'm trying to remember, Peggy, what you said, that the bonding term, maybe it was Lori, but has been extended from 20 years to 25 years. What about extending it out to 30 years or longer, or 50 years, as one commenter has asked? What about the bonding terms, and what impact would that have, and is it a good idea?
I think, well, what I said was that we are modeling right now a 30-year term with a level payment. So if we have a level debt, what happens is the curve goes down over time. The level debt is like a mortgage. It's lower in the earlier years. It doesn't go down over time, but it takes the edge off earlier years. So that I think that is what the town treasurer is currently thinking about, and the preferred term will of the financing will be presented at town meeting. But the numbers that I mentioned, I think $84 or something per year for the 7.2 million is based on a 30-year level payment term. So we usually, in the past, I think the elementary schools have been financed for 20, the high school is 25, 30 level payment. You know, we'll probably be paying for this after I'm gone, but that's, you know, that will take the edge off in the beginning.
Okay, the question also is it possible to extend the term beyond 30 years for this type of municipal financing? I wasn't sure if you can go beyond 30 years.
I don't have the answer to that, but I can tell you the town manager and treasurer and finance committee would probably not love that. The early savings over the $84 is probably not worth burdening future generations in trade-offs for other projects beyond 30 years. It may also be a legal limit. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, we don't want the finance director's head to start to spin, that's for sure. Okay, Diane, shall I ask another question, or do you want to go to the audience?
Louise Axon seems to have a very good question. Can you summarize that for us?
That basically is what I asked earlier before about what happens if we were to wait a year or two to launch the project? What would be the consequence of delay? And we had a short discussion on that. If there's anything else to add to that, we can.
I see her question is a little bit different than that. Louise, are you online? Could you ask your question for us, please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I thank you. I think it is a little different. Basically, my question is, normally I understand the economics of delay increasing costs on a large scale construction project. But we're in a very unusual financial situation right now with this extremely historic increase in inflation that hopefully the Fed will get under control and will go down perhaps in a couple of years or fewer years. We also have all these supply chain disruptions that are increasing the cost of commodities needed in building. So my question is, given the unusual financial situation we're in now, is it still fair to assume it's going to be more expensive if we delay this in a year or two and see what the financial, hope the economy gets back to where it has been historically?
So no one has a crystal ball and we don't know. In my experience, it takes a while for construction costs to follow the pattern of inflation, and that's just, and especially in public school or any public job, because of prevailing wages and supply chain. Like, we're still seeing supply chain issues, and that all began a year ago. So it's hard to say. Could there be a sweet spot? Could there be a potential for a decrease in costs if there were to wait? That's a roll of the dice. We don't know.
Well, I think it, I know some economics. I mean, I do think, inflation has been at 3% for decades and decades and decades. We're at 8.7 now. I think there is every hope that we can control that. You're right, it's possible we can't, but I think there's good economic reasons to believe that we're going to be able to do that. Supply chains, the COVID pandemic, unusual historical situation. So I think it's a fair question to say, yes, absolutely. It's normally true that delaying a big construction project is going to just increase. Inflation will increase and costs will increase. But I do think we're in an unusual economic moment, and it's such a big investment and having such an impact on taxpayers. I think it's a fair question to ask, and it'd be really interesting as part of your presentation if you would consider that, and whatever arguments you have, include that.
I think it's just hard to answer. I don't know if any of us have that answer.
Well, I mean, maybe one way to look at it is, what are the assumptions you're making with these cost projections? Are you assuming that inflation is going to stay at 8.7%?
So currently, we're only escalating out at where I think our escalation's it's 3.5 for 6 months, because we only need to escalate out till we get our hard bid, because that's basically what. So our costs include 2 days construction dollars, and escalation at I want to say it's 3.5 for 6 months, based on October budget to spring when we bid. So Lori, did you have something to add on that?
I was just going to add, I think Peggy wants to add too. But just a couple of points from the bigger picture view. All the work we did pre-pandemic to project costs indicated that even in normal times, construction costs increase. And we saw that was even faster than the 3% as we did the history research leading up to the first rounds of town meeting funding. I think the other part that's just really important to name, you've got kids in buildings that are chronically troubled. We carry extra monies to maintain those. We've committed to the town at least $500,000 of savings and operating costs. There's duplicative finances that happen here to keep these buildings online. And I think that's an important factor to weigh in. And I don't think we've said this here, the architects are going to go back and need to get paid for 6 months of time to redesign the school, essentially making the work they've done to date, useless. And I think we just want to we've certainly had to factor that into the soft cost variables. So
and so that's all helpful to know. So maybe what I'm saying is just, I don't think I'm the only one with this question in my head. So maybe just sort of saying, here are some of the fixed costs and sunk costs that we're not going to be able to, even if inflation goes down, we're not, they're a done deal, or, just making some of those a
that's
little
fair.
bit more explicit. Yeah.
That's a fair
Yeah,
comment. for sure.
thank you.
Diane, you're on mute.
Thank you, Louise. Those are good and helpful questions. Peggy, I think you have a comment, and then we'll go to Todd Benjamin.
Yeah, just very briefly, I want to correct my earlier, is it echoing?
Yeah.
I earlier said that 7.2 million was going to cost $84, but it's 73. So I just wanted to correct myself on that. And I will say that I know I specifically asked the building committee, what if we just took the whole package and put it on the shelf for a couple of years and hope that interest rates come down and costs come down, and they have gone back and done that work, and that's what they just have presented, the $11,000 number, and I think both Don and Lori have just added reasoning to that, but that is a specific question that the FinCom did ask, and it is in the package. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to note, the professionals have done the work on this. We have the backup that goes with it. It's not a slide that we've brought here, and it's more detailed than would fit on a slide. So that can be available.
Thank you so much. And Todd, good morning.
Oh, hi, good morning. I guess I have a question as it pertains to the big picture as well. And one of the things that troubles me is that we're looking at total inflation across the board of about 8% or plus, and that's an increase in everybody's expenses, especially those on fixed income. And then on top of that, we're looking at about $1,000 in property tax increases. And then on top of that, the town has, from what I understand, about $50 million in capital planning projects that they would like to do. So I get the sense sometimes that we're speaking of this project in a bubble and not speaking about it in terms of the other things that are putting stressors on residents. So in light of the big picture here, how do we expect residents, especially those on fixed incomes, to be able to support such a tremendous debt burden as 8% inflation, as $1,000 increase in property taxes for the school, plus whatever may be increased to meet the town's other goals?
I'll be happy to take that one.
I think we're all concerned about this. Thank you so much. Peggy, you
Yeah.
want to take this?
Yes, I'll take this one. Finance Committee and the town treasurer, we have spent quite a bit of time looking at that very specific question, Todd. And you'll see in our FinCom report that we have a summary of all excluded debt, not just this, for the median assessed value home. Now, the town and school projects that are currently financed, so there's some public safety facilities, I think, and the elementary schools, those all get paid off by fiscal 29. Then there's the high school that gets it goes out to fiscal 39. Minuteman High School, the money that the middle school's already issued goes out further. So those are all, getting paid off. Now we do have, the town has put forward a couple major public facilities, and they are, due to the capital planning process that was recently instituted, they have taken their high costs that would be over $5 million projects and put those on delay because of this debt burden overlay that you very accurately pointed out. So as these other projects, can get paid off, we'll be able to do more on the town side. It is troubling, but what we're talking about today, as I said, is $73 on a $1 million house. And there are mechanisms in town that we hope to implement and remind folks if they need assistance with their taxes. We know, the FinCom knows full well that the same inflationary and interest rate drivers for the school are affecting all residents in town. this was not a simple discussion. But we need to stay focused on the 7.2 million debt burden, and that's, as I said, basically $73 for a $1 million home, and any homes less than that, the cost would go down.
So thanks, Peggy. That's helpful, and I'll revisit that information. One of the takeaways I have from your comments is that it sounds like we're deferring public safety things such as the public safety building that the town has wanted to do, which could jeopardize our reaction time to emergencies in favor of the school. Am I reading that wrong?
Well, that is not correct. The type of public safety issues are sort of the height of the garage. It's literally 1 inch over the current fire truck, but they can still get in and out. It does not affect the reaction time. The town is currently working with the town of Acton to save money by combining just a combined dispatch center, which I think is a pretty good idea. It's not going to affect the safety, but it is true that some of those projects are being deferred. The other concern that the town manager has expressed in the board of selectmen is combining facilities so that well, it's really the public works, the whole Ties Road area to do some cleanup, but it's not going to affect public safety delivery. No.
Thank you so much. And Peggy keeps reminding us that it's really a $72 increase on a $1 million property that we're looking at right now on this vote. The other one is already there. The $102 million has been voted and consummated by the town. So we're looking at, and of course, the overall tax burden for all of us is something on our collective minds. But this particular vote does not grandly increase the tax burden. It's the larger question. Am I right, Peggy? That's right.
Yeah, and I'm reading from a draft of the Finance Committee report. This will be mailed to all homes prior to town meeting and present the combined debt burden as well as the projected tax impact of the Article 5 in the special town meeting.
Well, Todd, you've asked an important question and something on all of our minds. And what's been impressive to me has been watching the Middle School Building Committee and FinCom grapple with that all the way along. I mean, my sense has been they've been mindful of that, and I believe I'm speaking accurately. Peggy Wargeland, good morning.
Oh, hello. I was wondering, I remember at the town meeting last year when the big one passed, there was a discussion about there had been a committee set up to accept donations to help people who were unable to handle this extra tax burden, especially in that first 5 years. And we had taken some money from whatever the equivalent of free cash is and used it to chop off like the absolute peak to make it a little bit better. And I would also like to point out that a couple of years ago, we passed a home rule petition that lets homeowners who own their house but are income poor just waive paying property taxes, not even like postpone them until the house is sold or something. So if you have somebody who owns their house but has very little income, they get to save all the equity in their home to pass down to their children. And so I think we do have some stuff. There's been a lot of thought about how to keep people whose income is low able to live in the town and not have this impact them unduly. And I wondered, does this sound right to you, Peggy? And are there any other sort of courses to help people who are having trouble that I'm unaware of?
Thank you, Peggy. That's a fantastic question.
Well, you are correct. We have in place a stabilization fund. It's got $5 million in it right now, transferred from free cash, and we may be able to add to that this coming year. And that does take the peak off the maximum tax hit. The home rule petition, I don't think has gone quite as far as you are mentioning, but I may be wrong. We've been working on something like that for many years. And there's also a tax relief, but there is a tax relief fund and a Hugh Cargill fund, which are both in town and are largely designated to help people with the tax bill and other bills that they may not be able to afford.
I believe, and help me, everybody who knows more than I, but I believe the home rule petition is something we've passed, but it has to be okayed by the state. And so,
Thank you. Okay, I thought it was like a done deal, but
how I
we
wish,
did
but-
approve that. So we want
we did.
people on fixed incomes to be able to stay.
Absolutely, and we certainly we certainly voted for that, but then it has to be approved on a state level. So, Carlin, are there other questions in the chat?
Can I just add, Article 4 for special town meeting, folks might know the Junction Village project, which is a assisted living affordable project in West Concord, is it's not going to go forward. And Article 4 is going to take, let me see if I can just.
I've got that, Peggy. 1,011,000 blump blump blump.
Yeah. And that will be going from that Junction Village project back into the Community Preservation Fund for Affordable Housing. And we built up quite a balance for affordable housing, and the Finance Committee is very supportive of that as well.
Thank you, Peggy. As the chair of the CPC, I'll just quickly say that it's a two-step process. First, we have to take that money and put it in our housing reserve. If that's approved by the town, then we have a regular warrant article ready for the regular town meeting to ask that money to be forwarded to the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So that's an exciting thing, and Todd and others. I mean, I think that another project, of course, is affordable housing in the town, and so this is we're working hard on trying to make that possible. Are there?
Can I ask one more question here from the chat box, and it deals with the elements of the school itself. Is the current design all electric? This is from Pamela Dritt and Bill Herring. Does it include heat pump, heating and cooling, and will the air handling exchange include things like UV sanitation to protect from COVID? So what the current design is being proposed?
It is all electric, certainly. There is no UV system, COVID. However, we've extensively talked about the HVAC system in regard to student health. So it's a strong, robust system that will certainly benefit the health and wellness of kids and adults in the school.
Can I just caveat the all electric? I think the backup generator is gas powered, is my recollection. That's the only non-elect, yeah.
Nothing more than that. Not even the Bunsen burners in the science.
In the science, that's right. So I just want to, because that was discussed, and I think that was actually a value management decision. I can't remember, but there was lots of discussion around that, and could dig it up if there's interest. But
hopefully we won't need a backup generator, and it's not even a fact.
But they do have to test it every month, so it does draw a small amount. It needs to be tested and whatnot. But anyway.
Thank you for the honesty of that response. Wilson Kerr is asking an interesting question, Carlin. Won't the interest rate change if, as the debt is restructured to take advantage of dropping interest rates, which would lower the tax burden? Is that true? And I presume you're all thinking about that. Are you?
I'll take that one. There are a couple of, we're presenting at town meeting with a little over 5% as the projected interest rate. We're looking at a couple of, or the town treasurer has talked about a couple of techniques to reduce or to make sure we don't buy into the highest interest rate. So one is to issue the bonds in a sequence over a couple of years as we need them. So, we're not paying for all the construction up front at the highest interest rate. We could hope it goes down, hope it doesn't go up. You never know. But that is one technique, is to sort of ladder the bonds out over time. Also, the bonds are generally callable after 10 years. So first 10 years is fixed. After that, if the interest rate is low again, it can be refinanced.
Terrific. That's reassuring, isn't it? If we can refinance. Todd, you're going to have the last question, I think.
Okay, thanks. I was hoping I'm confused about the reason that we didn't get state funding for this. And I've heard various different things. And so I'm wondering if somebody can elucidate that and clarify it. One thing I heard is that the amount of space required for the educational plans exceeds the state limit. And I've heard a lot of different things. So just trying to understand what is fact and what is not fact.
We
And-
applied for 4 years.
Yeah, we
and
applied
it-
4 times. Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with space. The MSBA will let you build whatever building you want, actually. Like they would let you build an auditorium. You just have to pay for it 100%. They're not going to participate in it. The only things they will specifically exclude are pools. They will not allow you to build a building with a pool, even on your own dime.
But none of that has anything to do with the
Nothing
application.
of that. Yes. So the only reason we were rejected, it's based on need, and they assess, I don't know,
80
up to
projects a year.
85. Yeah, 85
And
projects a year.
12
and they
get
accept
funded.
10.
Yeah.
They accept somewhere around 10 every year, and so, and we just had, they do look at what you just, so we just had the high school a few years ago. They look at, other, was Willard an MSBA project? I didn't live here then. It was not. So, they just factor in communities need, age of the building, how it's been maintained. There's a lot of, they have their own sort of formula, but it has nothing to do with the size of building that you want to build. So just to make that crystal clear, that's not an issue.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
It's the rich town syndrome, and we've lost a lot of state aid over time. Our schools, the town really is on minimal state aid at this point, which means we're pretty independent. We can do whatever we want without risking losing it. But it's a rich town syndrome, and the state is taking that more seriously than it did maybe 20 years ago.
It's Todd, I'm so glad for the clarification. Every time I think of that, I think of schools in Roxbury and Boston, whose needs are profound right now, and in all the stuff that the Boston Globe has covered about those schools and their needs. It's not that I'm happy to pay more money in taxes, but I understand if that agency gears their money in other directions right now. I just want to thank.
And I'll just voice the MSBA's response when I've asked that question 4 years in a row, that they reminded me that 3 schools of the 5 here were MSBA projects. So we can't completely say that either, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laurie. Well, I want to thank you all so much, Peggy, Carlin for managing the chat box as she always does with such skill, Peggy from the FinCom, Dawn and Laurie, and all the work that you've been doing on this, and everybody who joined us, and the good questions you've been asking. This has been recorded, and if you want to see it again or review it, it will be up on the league website. Reasonably soon, so you can watch for that and have other friends of yours who have questions, because some very good questions have been asked, who have questions about their vote and going forward to be able to view this. I want to thank the people in the background, Nancy Confrey and Linda Ziffrin. And I just want to say, Linda's in Arizona. Now we could all say, oh my gosh, Arizona. Yeah, but she had to get up really early to be part of this. So cheers to Linda. Just as a reminder of a couple of things that have to do with the league. First of all, if you haven't joined the league, for heaven's sake, do so. These projects and these programs are made possible because of your membership and your engagement. So that's one thing. The second thing is, and it's not very expensive, guys. I mean, just do it. And then on the 9th of December, we're having a special celebration. And maybe Carlin, you want to quickly describe this for us? She's done a beautiful job. So
Sure, thanks. It's a clerk's reception. It's honoring the work of the Concord and the Carlisle town clerks. It'll be held at the Carlisle Congregational Church, 147 School Street in Carlisle on December 9th from 3 to 4:30 p.m. We'll have some refreshments, but then Kari Maitari from Concord and Peggy Wang from Carlisle, will each give a 15-minute talk about what they saw concerning the election process, their perspectives. That's it. Thanks.
Which is really exciting. We'll have a chance to ask questions, and a lot of the people who helped to man those polls I think will be joining us, and I hope other people here will too. It's important to mention that the funding for that has been made possible by a memorial fund for Barbara Lewis, a woman was very much involved in the league for years, and so that money is being used to support this particular in her name. And then just one more reminder about dates. So on special town meeting on January 19th, and we'll be at the high school, obviously, as usual. And then on February 16th, a chance to vote. And Carlin reminds us that it's a 2/3 vote that is required at the town meeting. So if you have friends who have questions, please, send them to this video so that they can be well informed. Thank you all so much for being part of this morning. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you for having us. Bye, everyone. Thank you for your time.